Park battles are fun, entertaining ways of hearing opinions about coasters, but they can also lead to conclusions that are just plain wrong. I saw this tweet and I finally got the motivation to talk about something I've wanted to talk about for a while now. Park battles aren't a good way of determining which park has the better rides. I'm not here to bash this person's opinion. It just got me thinking about the ways in which park battles can be manipulated to get the results you want. And I'm not even saying this person did that either. Here we see someone who claims that Hershey Park has a better coaster lineup than Cedar Point, using a park battle to prove this assertion. Now, I love Hershey, but I would call this an unpopular opinion. While some may disagree with a few of these opinions, I want to make clear that there's nothing wrong with preferring one coaster to another. Nothing I say in this video will call this person's coaster opinions wrong. They're just as valid as my own opinions, or your opinions. What I really want to talk about is how even under the best circumstances, park battles can mislead you. There are methodological problems that extend beyond any opinion presented here. So, what's the first problem with the park battle? Other than this person ranking 3 coasters that at the time of the tweet nobody had been on, that is. Take a look at the Maverick-Fahrenheit matchup, and then the Kiddie Coaster matchup. Maverick's win counts the same as Coco Cruiser's win, which I think we all understand is a flaw in the system. I mean, if these were the only 2 coasters at each park, which park would you say has the better lineup? Your answer to that question should depend entirely on whether you think Maverick or Fahrenheit is better, unless you're 5 years old. But from a typical enthusiast perspective, kiddie coasters just don't have that much influence on the quality of a park's lineup, so Maverick having its win cancelled out by a kiddie coaster battle is ridiculous. Some modified park battles try to fix this by making major rides worth more points, like 2 or 3. And this definitely helps avoid the kiddie coaster problem, but it just causes another problem to spring up. You could have reasonably close gaps that suddenly turn into wide disparities. Let's run a quick park battle between the top 3 coasters at Kings Dominion and Six Flags New England. These parks match up well with each other. Both have a monstrous Intamin, a small-scale RMC, and a B&M Floorless as their best coasters. We'll set the Intimidator 305 vs Superman matchup as a 3-pointer, and we'll make Twisted Timbers vs Wicked Cyclone 3 points as well. We'll let Dominator vs Batman be a 2-pointer. Let's use their Captain Coaster ranking to be as objective as possible in seeing who wins each matchup. And Kings Dominion gets the edge at every matchup, so it wins 2 3-point matchups plus the 2-point matchup. Now it has an 8-point lead, and it seems like Kings Dominion's top 3 destroys Six Flags New England's top 3. Does that conclusion sound like an objective fact to you? It shouldn't. It's totally reasonable for someone to think New England's top 3 is better. Kings Dominion only has very slim victories, but this method turns them into an insurmountable lead. Okay, maybe some of the matchups are so close that we just call it a draw, like in the tweet. But how close does it need to be? The 2 smaller RMCs are very close in the CC poll, so maybe we just say, if 2 rides are within 10 spots of each other, we call it a draw. But then what if we have a hypothetical matchup several hundred spots below, where one park has a ride that ranks at 550, and the other park has a ride that's at 561? According to the rule we just set down, that should count as a win. But is there really that much of a difference between the 550th and 561st best coasters in the world? Probably not, so it's probably not worth a point in that park's favor. You see the problem. The same distance between spots matters more at the top of the list and less at the bottom of the list. What if one park has the world's 1200th best coaster, and another park has the world's 1211th? It clearly shouldn't matter. To make this truly fair, we would have to constantly adjust the gap in ranking spots by which a win is required, with less of a gap needed between good rides and a larger gap between worse rides. How? We would need to come up with a way. Remember, we want this to be an objective method, and we're already needing to make lots of decisions that require us to make some kind of arbitrary distinction. Okay, so trying to create a system that allows for draws is too complicated. Maybe you just assign points to matchups so coasters win by less? Like, Twisted Timbers is worth a full 3 points, but Wicked Cyclone is worth 2.5, so it helps Kings Dominion, but only slightly. That's better, but now it's just like we're assigning points to the coasters based on how much we like them. We don't necessarily need matchups for this, all we're doing is assigning points to every coaster in the park. So why bother with matchups at all? Just go by points. We'll get to a better method later that does this. If we still want to match up coasters, we would still have to decide what happens when you run out of similar coasters at each park. This brings us to our second key problem. You can't match up coasters perfectly, and have to decide how to handle coasters that don't match up properly. Do you stop making comparisons and just give out extra points? Well, you don't want to give all coasters the same point value, since we already established kiddie rides shouldn't be worth the same as thrill rides, so now you're back to the points-based system again and ignoring matchups. If you're going to do this, just go with a full points-based system. Do you force comparisons between every ride at each park? Well, we start by comparing similar coasters, but then we eventually run out and have to start deciding which coasters to match up. These decisions are highly subjective, and the way coasters are matched up with one another will drastically affect the outcome of the battle, so it's important to have a system. But without easy comparisons, it becomes a nightmare that is easily subject to manipulation. In the tweet, the person matched up Skyrush with Millennium Force. Someone suggested that Skyrush be matched up with Gatekeeper. I think Skyrush should be matched up with Magnum. These are all our own opinions, which are okay to have, but it goes to show there isn't a proper way to do the matchups, which is a problem. Watch what happens when we match Skyrush with Magnum and Candemonium with Millennium Force. Now we're matching up two aggressive hypers with strong ejector airtime, and matching up two more graceful, smooth, comfortable rides, but which are still very thrilling. This seems like a totally reasonable matchup. But while Skyrush still wins its matchup, now Millie wins a matchup. Instead of two Hershey wins, now the matchups are split. Go by Captain Coaster or Vote Coasters, and you'll see Skyrush ahead of Millennium Force, ahead of Candemonium, ahead of Magnum. From this information, if we want to make two matchups, we can get either two Hershey wins or an even 1-1 split. This is a huge issue that once again depends on the individual's subjective decision on how to match up the rides. But here's the most shocking thing of all. Even if two coaster lineups do match up 100% perfectly, there is still no guarantee that you will accurately determine which park is better. Take two imaginary parks, A and B. Each park has the same four models of coaster: a B&M Hyper, a Schwarzkopf Looper, a Vekoma Suspended Family Coaster, and a CCI Woody. Let's do a park battle and use their imaginary rankings in some poll to determine which lineup is better. Park B has a slight edge in 3 of the 4 matchups. Park A only wins the CCI battle. Thus, Park B wins the park battle 3-1 and therefore must have the better lineup, right? Wrong! Park A is generally better in the rankings. And I mean, just think about it. Park A has 2 very good coasters and 2 fine supporting coasters. Park B has 1 very good coaster and 3 fine supporting coasters. The park battle made it seem like Park A had a generally inferior lineup, but we can see that this is deceptive and ignores the huge gap between the quality of their wooden coasters. Let's see if we can save the park battle by trying one more method that completely ignores matching up similar coasters and instead matches up the top coasters at each park, then the second best coasters, then the third best, and so on. We'll run back the Hershey Park vs Cedar Point matchup this way, and this time we'll mix it up and use Vote Coasters rankings. Now, Cedar Point takes every matchup, winning in a complete landslide. Even without Dragster, this would still be the outcome. It should be clear by now that there is no good way to do a park battle, but there is a much better way to use polling data. I mentioned that using a system that assigns points to rides and tallies up the points at each park would be best, but how should we determine the points? Check out this video from Coaster Guy 23, who used polling data to produce a ranking of parks by coaster lineup that feels pretty accurate. Of course, he does have to make a few arbitrary decisions on how to assign points, but it is much better at accounting for the difference in quality between rides at each park, unlike our Park A vs Park B example. Is this the real best way to rank parks by coaster collection? I think there is one better way that I haven't seen done before, and it's pretty obvious. Just use the pairwise comparison method used by the Mitch Hawker poll, Captain Coaster, and Vote Coasters, but on parks instead of coasters. Everybody could submit their own list of the parks they've been to ranked by the quality of their coaster lineup, in their own opinion, of course. This way, we wouldn't have to look at every coaster's ranking on a website and feed it into some system to determine how good a park is, as we've tried to do many times over the course of this video. It would just be people's general opinions, with the natural barriers against bias that the pairwise comparison method naturally includes. This doesn't mean every park battle you've ever seen is a waste of time. I'll still continue to check them out to be entertained and hear other people's opinions. But it does mean you should take their conclusions with caution. Thanks for watching.